I can speak 10 languages, sir. Let me translate it for you.
What the hell are you talking about? Are you not the maid?
If you've ever been overlooked, underpaid, or underestimated by someone who had no idea who they were dealing with, stay until the end. This one is for you. Barbara Michael had cleaned the penthouse floors of Dominic Tower for 4 years. Every morning she arrived before sunrise, before the elevators filled with suits, before the marble lobby echoed with the sound of expensive shoes. She polished surfaces that would be dirtied again by noon. She restocked bathrooms that nobody thanked her for. She moved through the building like a ghost, seen by no one, needed by everyone. To Richard Dominic, the billionaire who owned every inch of that tower, Barbara did not exist. That was fine with her. She had a plan. The morning everything changed. Barbara was on her knees wiping down the baseboard outside the main boardroom when the shouting started. The doors were thick, but panic has a sound all its own. Richard Dominic had assembled his most powerful board members for the closing of a landmark deal, a $200 million merger with a prestigious German engineering firm. Contracts were drafted. Handshakes had been exchanged. A photographer was already waiting in the lobby for the announcement. Then the German delegation's lead attorney slid a final addendum across the table and spoke at length, calmly, precisely, and entirely in German. Nobody in the room understood a single word. The company's interpreter had collapsed that morning with a medical emergency. The replacement was unreachable. Every outside agency Richard's assistant called was either unavailable or hours away. The German delegation sat with polite, thinning patience. The deal was dissolving in real time. Richard stepped into the hallway, phone pressed to his ear, jaw tight. That's when he saw Barbara. On her knees, grey uniform, bucket beside her, looking up at him with calm, steady eyes. He almost walked past her. Almost. Something made him stop. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was instinct. He looked at her the way powerful men look at people they've spent years not seeing, uncertain, slightly embarrassed, and too proud to show either. "You don't happen to speak German, do you?" he said, half a joke, not really a question. Barbara set down her cloth slowly. "I speak 10 languages, sir," she said. "German is one of them. I can interpret it for you." The hallway went quiet. Richard stared at her for a long moment. His assistant, standing just behind him, opened her mouth and closed it again. Down the corridor, 2 board members had stepped out and were watching with undisguised confusion. He looked at this woman, her grey uniform, her bucket, her unhurried expression, and made the only decision a practical man with $200 million on the line could make. "Come inside," he said. Barbara stood, smoothed her uniform, and walked into the boardroom. What happened over the next 2 hours would never leave that room, except it did, because people always talk. She didn't just translate words, she translated worlds. When the German attorney made a reference rooted in Frankfurt commercial law that carried a completely different implication under American contract terms, Barbara stopped the room, explained the discrepancy in both languages simultaneously, and proposed bridging language that satisfied both legal teams. When cultural tensions surfaced beneath the surface of a negotiation point, subtle, unspoken, the kind that kills deals quietly, she named it with such precision that both sides visibly relaxed. The lead German attorney began directing his remarks to her directly. At one point, he said something in German that made his entire delegation nod. Richard looked at Barbara. "What did he say?" Barbara paused for just a moment. "He said he's glad someone in the room actually prepared." The boardroom was silent. The deal closed. When the delegation stood to leave, the lead attorney approached Barbara, spoke to her in German, and extended his hand. She responded fluently. They exchanged a few sentences. He laughed, deep and genuine, and gave a small respectful bow before walking out. Richard watched all of it. After the room emptied, he stood at the head of the table looking at Barbara, who was already moving toward the door. "Wait," he said. She turned. "What else do you speak?" "German, French, Mandarin, Japanese, Arabic, Portuguese, Italian, Russian, Dutch, and English," she said evenly. "I also hold a master's degree in international business law. I applied for a position at this firm 3 years before I started in housekeeping." She held his gaze. "I was told there were no openings." Richard said nothing. "There were 4 openings that year," she added, not with bitterness, just with truth. The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room. Richard Dominic was a man who had built his empire on never being caught off guard. He had fired executives for less than what he had just been confronted with. He had walked away from partnerships, friendships, and deals without a second thought. But something about the way Barbara stood there, no anger, no performance, no need for his reaction, broke through something in him that boardrooms usually don't reach. He apologized. Slowly, plainly, without lawyers in the room. He told her the truth, that applications like hers were filtered long before they reached his desk, that he had designed a system that kept people exactly like her, exactly where he'd found her, and that he had spent years calling that system meritocracy. She listened. She didn't tell him it was okay. It wasn't. But she nodded, and that was enough to begin. 6 weeks later, Barbara Michael was appointed Vice President of Global Partnerships at Dominic International. To be continued. Hope you learned something today. Moral lessons of this story are: dignity is not something a title gives you. Barbara carried herself with the same quiet authority on her knees with a cleaning cloth as she did sitting at a $200 million table. That's not something you learn in a boardroom. That is something you build in private, over years, when nobody is watching and nobody is clapping. The world will put you in a uniform and hand you a bucket and wait to see if you forget who you are. Don't forget. Your preparation is never wasted. Your knowledge is never wasted. The right moment will come, and when it does, you won't need to perform. You'll just need to show up as exactly who you already are. And sometimes, the person who saves everything is the one nobody bothered to look at twice. If this story moved you, follow for a new story every single week. And if someone in your life has ever been underestimated and kept going anyway, share this with them right now. They deserve to see themselves in this story today.